This lesson is on dividing radicals and rationalizing the denominator. Just as a reminder, to have simplified radical form, we need to remember these three things. 1, no more roots can be factored. And number 2, the radicand is not a fraction. And number 3, no radicals are in the denominator. So let's get started on the quotient property for radicals. We can write the square root of a divided by b equals to the square root of a divided by b as these two forms. And if we can, we always want to simplify a with b when possible. So you'll do that first before doing any operation. Let's look at the first example, letter A. We're doing the cube root of 2x divided by 54. Now if we can simplify in here, we do that first, and I can see that we can. So I'm going to rewrite this as the cubed root, and I know that 2 can go into 2 and 54, so I'll rewrite it as cubed root of x divided by 27. And then from there, I know that I will separate it and rewrite it like this. So I'll have the cubed root of x divided by the cubed root of 27. From there, if I can do any simplifying, I will. The numerator will stay the same, but I know that the cubed root of 27 is 3. And now I have met all of the criteria. So it is in simplified form. Letter B, again I'm going to rewrite it as 1 radical, so it's the square root of 72x squared divided by 2. And I know that 72 divided by 2 is 36, so I have 36x squared. And we know the square root of 36 is 6, and we know that the square root of x squared is going to be x. So our answer is 6x, and it is in simplified form. Letter C, I can see that it's already in as 1 radical, so I can go ahead and simplify. And I know that it'll be x over 7. And then I can rewrite it like this, the other form. And normally I would end. However, we know that we cannot have a radical in the denominator. So what are we going to do? Well, let's look at this. What happens if the denominator has a radical? We're going to have to rationalize the denominator, which means we're going to eliminate the radical in the denominator. So we're going to multiply the numerator and the denominator by a radical that clears the radical from the denominator. So in order to get rid of this radical, I want to multiply by the square root of 7, right? Because the square root of 7 times the square root of 7, right, is going to be the square root of 49, which we know is 7. And then here I would write 7x. And that would be then in simplified form. I got rid of the radical in the denominator. Okay, and we call that rationalizing the denominator by multiplying a radical to clear the radicals from the denominator, so we end up with just a number. Let's look at dividing by a monomial. For this one, I'm going to simplify the denominator because I can see it's a radical, so I'll simplify first, and I will get 4 square root 2. And then I'm going to have to rationalize the denominator, so I'm going to multiply by the square root. Oops, actually before I do that, I can even simplify further. So I know I'll have negative x over 2 square root 2. You could have simplified afterwards, but usually simplifying first makes things a little bit less complicated. Then I'm going to rationalize and multiply by the square root of 2, right, because I want to get rid of this radical in the denominator. So I'll end up with negative x square root 2 in the numerator divided by 2 times 2, right? The radical 2 times radical 2 is 2. And my final answer will be negative x square times the square root of 2 divided by 4, and then it is in simplified form. Looking at some more, now we're doing the cubed root. So I'll leave the numerator, there's nothing to simplify. But in the denominator, I know that 192 is the same thing as 64 times 3. And the cubed root of 64 is 4. So I know I have 4x cubed root 3. Okay? So now I have to rationalize this denominator because I do have a radical down here. And it's a cubed root, so I need 3 of something. So in this case, I'm going to multiply it by the cubed root of 3 squared. All right, if I do that, then I'll have a 3 and 2 3's here, so I'll have a total of 3, which our index indicates we need 3 of some number in order to cubed root it. So now I know in my numerator I will have the cubed root of 45, right, because this is 9 times 5, divided by, and I know I'm going to have 4x times 3. Don't know why I wrote 49, I meant 45. Okay, and so I can write my final answer as the cubed root of 45 divided by 12x, and it is in simplified form. Letter F, I'm going to simplify the denominator if I can, and the numerator, but in this case there's nothing to simplify in the numerator. So for the denominator, I know that I have the square root of 18, so it's going to be 3, right, because 9 times 2, so 3 2x, square root 2x. I'm going to multiply to rationalize the square root of 2x times the square root of 2x. And I don't have to do a squared this time because it's not a cubed root, it's a square root. And in this case, I'm going to have to distribute this to both of these. So I'll have 4x times the square root of 2x plus 2 times the square root of 2x squared. Okay, don't forget x times x is x squared. Down here, I know I'm going to have 3 times 2x. And then I can do some simplifying up here. I have 4x square root of 2x plus 2x square root 2, and I have 6x. And you can see here that I can, if I have something in common, actually the 4, 2x, 6x, I can simplify, right? I could factor out a 2x in the numerator and a 2x in the denominator, but I'm just going to look at these and know I'm dividing each one by 2x. So I end up with the square root of 2x, 2 square root 2x, I'm dividing by 2x, plus the square root of 2, and 6x divided by 2x is going to be 3, and that is my simplified form. So not only are we simplifying for radical form, but also if we can simplify our numbers and our variables on the outside of the radical as well. All right, dividing by a binomial. Number 1, we're going to multiply the conjugate, which means the same terms in a binomial but opposite sign. Okay, but the opposite sign. Step 2, use the difference of squares pattern to rationalize the denominator. Remember, only first and last for a FOIL. Alright, so for this one, I'm going to write it as it is. And then I'm going to multiply by the conjugate, which is 3 minus the square root of 2, divided by 3 minus the square root of 2. Okay? And if you're wondering at this point why we always have the numerator and denominator, just remember that what we do to the numerator, we must do to the denominator to keep it equal, right? If we're going to multiply the numerator by this, we have to do the denominator, otherwise we're changing it completely. So always keep that in mind. And we're multiplying by the conjugate, which means it's the same terms, but we're doing the opposite sign in the middle, okay? And then I'm going to have to distribute. So I'll get 15x minus 5x square root 2. And then for this one, I'm multiplying by the binomial, but I'm only doing my first and last, because when you're multiplied by the conjugate, the outers and inners cancel. So 3 times 3 is 9, and then minus square root of 2 times 2, okay, which we know is going to be 9 minus 2. So if I'm going to write my final answer, I know it's going to be 15x minus 5x square root 2 all over 7. And then it is in simplified form. We're going to do a few more like this. Okay, we have our binomial, and I'm going to multiply by the conjugate. I'm going to rewrite it first. Okay, so the conjugate is negative 2 plus 5x squared square root 2. So negative 2 plus 5x squared square root 2. And I'm going to have to distribute. So I'll have negative 8 plus 20 x squared square root 2. Again, I'm multiplying by the conjugate, so I'm just doing my first. Negative 2 times 2 is 4. And my last minus 25 x to the 4th times 2. So my final answer, actually before I write my final answer, I'm going to write this as 50x to the 4th. Okay? And then from there I can see that all these numbers are divisible by 2. So I want to simplify. So I'll have negative 4 plus 10x squared square root 2 divided by 2 minus 25x to the 4th. Okay, and it is in simplified form. Alright, we're going to just do one more. So again, I'm going to rewrite it so I can clearly see what I'm doing. I'm going to multiply by the conjugate, which is 4 plus the square root of x divided by 4 plus the square root of x. Okay. And then I will have to, these are binomials, so I'm going to have to do my FOIL in the numerator. So I will have first as 8 plus 2 square root x, right? My outers, my inners, plus 4 square root 3x, and my last square root 3x squared. And my first and last here would be 16 minus x. And if you want, well, then we have to simplify just one more thing, and I'm going to highlight it. We're just simplifying that. That's all that's left to simplify. And I'm just going to rewrite it here as x square root 3. And that would be your final answer. And that is the lesson on dividing radicals and rationalizing denominators.